You are now listening to the Curtis King Podcast. Music producers, welcome to another episode of the Curtis King Podcast. If this is your first time listening and or watching, I gotta let you know you are in for a special treat. I wanted to address a topic that you should already know by now if you're looking at the title here, either on the streaming platforms that you're listening to this podcast on. I want to say, first of all, thank you for being here. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, which our YouTube channel was Curtis King TV, and you should come over here and check out the community, really dope community full of producers just like yourself and just creatives in general. If you don't know what this podcast is about, this is a podcast dedicated to music producers, creatives, and thinkers alike. So we go through many different topics, but really the common thread is mental health. That being said, though, today I want to address a question that I feel like I've been asked this question a trillion times since I started to embark on my journey as a music producer, but not just a music producer, a YouTuber as well. As I started to, I guess, become a mentor to so many producers through giving my advice, this has been a question that I never really had a solid answer for, in my opinion. I guess it was solid enough for them at the time, but I feel like in general, whenever a question continues to get asked over and over and over again, it's a sign that maybe you're not quite nailing it, or maybe it's not quite resonating on the level that it should. So, me being the true Aquarius that I am, I must dedicate myself to figuring out how can I give you an answer to that question. The question being, how do you know when a beat is done? That is a question that can go very technical or very spiritual. And as you'll see in today's episode, I've been able to compile videos and audio, all original, just for this episode from some of the top producers in our sphere. I was able to talk to many different producers that I think that you're going to be amazed by not only who it is, but their answers and how they approach their beat making process. And when they finally come to their, I don't want to say come to their senses, but when they come to a conclusion that, you know what, I think that I am done adding things to this. I wanted to make sure that I brought this to you because I know if I was on the other side and I was watching these podcasts, this will be something that I feel like will be ultimately beneficial. So the way this is going to be formatted is as follows. I'm going to give my opinions throughout this episode, not on what the guests are saying, but just in general on the topic. How do I know when my beat is done? And throughout this episode, we'll have little split cut-ins that are going to basically show you their answers and obviously have their names. So I do suggest that you come check us out on YouTube to see more information and just to see the passion that went behind a lot of these answers, which, I mean, that was something that blew me away, is that this really is a question that on the surface seems really simplistic. Well, how do I know when a beat is done? When it starts sounding like it's too much in it? Well, yeah, that's one answer. But I think that you'll be surprised by the many different approaches that these producers go through, especially the fact that a lot of it kind of has a common thread, even though these producers don't make the same type of music. From trap to hip hop to lo-fi, I tried to get as many producers as I could within my network that, I felt like would give some really thought-provoking answers. And as you'll see, man, like I said, you guys are in for a treat. I want to start this episode off first by addressing this question on an artistic level. And I found a website that had a bunch of inspirational quotes from famous artists, some of which I'm familiar with, some of which I'm not familiar with. So if I butcher the name, please excuse me. But I compiled these because, I like to start off either by reading something from a book sometimes when we get into these kind of topics, or by starting off with quotes. So let's start off with some of these quotes about art in general. First one from Albert Camus. A true masterpiece does not tell everything. I like that. A true masterpiece does not tell everything. When we talk about that in context of our music, perhaps your true masterpiece doesn't need to say everything. One quote. Another quote from Mark Chagall. Mark Chagall. If I create from the heart, nearly everything works. If it's from the head, almost nothing. I know a lot of producers can relate to that. I know I can relate to that. Anytime that I, as a producer, start to make decisions that are not musical decisions in the beat making process, I usually start to do some things that are out of character. I usually do some things that kind of take the momentum and the life out of the beat. And I start to kind of use that prefrontal cortex to make decisions about this beat. Oh, it's not done because I need to add this new plugin that I just bought because I paid good money for it and I need to include it in this beat, or I need to include all the stuff that I have been researching on YouTube and tutorials. That's not a music decision. That's a personal issue first and foremost, but that's a personal thing. That's not really a musical decision. When you're listening to the music and you're asking yourself, am I telling the story accurately, and what can help tell this story more accurately? I think those things are very important. Leonardo da Vinci, art is never finished, only abandoned. I love that one. So maybe art is never finished. Maybe the answer to this question, how do I know when my beat is finished? It's never finished. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the last one is from Rembrandt. This one is one of my favorite ones of this collection of quotes. It says, a work is finished when an artist realizes his intentions. Let's just say his or her intentions. The person that brought this to light, but somebody who kind of captured it in their own way, says, Rembrandt implies that it's up to the artist to decide, not to critics who may say a work appears raw, lacking a complete appearance, so on and so on. So those are a few quotes that in general speak to this art form that we're all a part of. They speak to an idea of completion that really, when you dice it down and you think about when is a beat done, I guess the first question you must ask yourself is, done for who? If it's done for this imaginary demographic that's out there that you've never met, well, how do we know what they see as done? If you're doing it for yourself, well, how do you know when you are truly done with something? I think that throughout our careers, we'll make our own rules based upon our home runs. Those beats that really, really resonated on a level where not just the people who acknowledge how great it was, but also us having a vivid memory about how the session came together, how unexpected the nature of that session was, how you were going through something positive or negative, and that session brought you a sense of peace. It brought you this sort of floaty atmosphere. If you saw the movie Soul, right, when they talk about being in the zone and how a lot of people become so addicted sometimes to being in that zone that they lose themselves, good and a bad way. But when you think about being in that place, you got to ask yourself, how much of this is by chance and how much of this is just a spiritual experience in itself? And when you ask yourself that, that's when those situations, those circumstances become so much more memorable. And you say to yourself, wait, something special is getting ready to happen. I don't know how I know this, but something about the ease of the plugins that came in, the ease of the drums, just how everything fits like a puzzle, fits perfectly, no struggle. Something special about this.
All right, how do you know when a beat is done? I would say the real answer is you never know. But if I had to give an answer, I would say if you're making beats for an artist, I would say the beat is, you can stop making the beat when the vibe is out. When there's a vibe that you can bob your head to and feel it, I would just say you could probably stop there, because you might be adding too much stuff to where if you want an artist to get on it, there's probably, you could be adding open hats in spots where you don't need them and stuff like that. If you're making beats that are like beat battle beats, that can never end. You can continue making that forever and ever. So if you're making beats or songs that are going to be finished products and nobody else is going to get on it, I would say you just have to go with your gut on that one, or just make a bunch of different versions and show it to people and ask them which one they like the most. That's what I've done. My face is red. I was just snowboarding. Curtis King podcast, baby.
Hey guys. So when I'm making a beat for a rapper or an artist, I know when it's done when I can start freestyling over it. So if I can get some good top line or flows going in my head, then that's kind of just saying wrap it up. Just add some arrangement and a few sounds and we're good to go. And that's it. Yeah.
Another question you may want to ask is, well, Curtis, if I'm providing these beats for not necessarily an audience, but for a consumer, say someone who is buying beats, well, there may be questions that you have that are a little bit more unique because you are creating a product, after all, that is for a particular type of customer. And when I was selling beats, I was very obsessive about creating an atmosphere for the artist that was so complimentary to them or made them feel so much larger than life. That's why I added so many instruments to my beats. And it wasn't for every artist, obviously, but the idea was that I wanted to make even the most mediocre rapper sound like the most legendary orator of all time, right? The most thought-provoking trash lyrics you ever heard in your life. That was my mentality. My mentality was trying to create a backdrop, trying to not steal the show. And as I was making those beats, I started to ask myself that question: am I stealing the show when there are other actors that are going to come up on stage? Now, I say actors loosely because I'm saying stage, not saying that anybody's not being authentic about their art form. But if we look at this as a production, a show, I mean, life is a show in general. But if we look at this as a production, a life production of music, it is our job as producers, especially when we're in the marketplace of selling beats, to create an atmosphere that complements the artist, not just complements, but aids them in a way where words are not able to capture the pure emotion, the gut-wrenching nature, the tear-invoking vibes of a string, a singular string note in a high octave, right? The vocals sometimes, as singers, they can carry some of those textures, but the strings are the strings for a reason. Or the menacing and overpowering domination of a brass in a lower octave. I felt like at that point it was my responsibility as a producer who was selling beats to create an atmosphere that did not steal the show, but also inspired the artist to tell a story or to tell a narrative or to express an emotion, a strong emotion. I felt like that was always, and I guess that's kind of always been a common theme through my entire career, is that if the beat didn't evoke something out of me emotionally, nostalgic wise, then that's usually the beats that I will look at as throwaway beats at that point in time. Beats that I just didn't want to even mess around with. I would delete them or move on. But emotion always had to be involved. And as I got into the marketplace early on in my career of selling beats and getting my beats out there and trying to find ways to compliment around the artist, I found myself doing less and less and less because I started to get customers that were like, yeah, I love it, but I don't know what to add to it. So in essence, they're having a very similar issue in that they're saying, it seems like it's too complete.
Hey, yo, what's good, Curtis? So as far as knowing when a beat is finished, it depends on what your goal is. So if you're making something for an artist, or if you're trying to sell beats online or sell beats to artists and create more artist-friendly content. Something that I've been practicing is like, you ever been making a beat and you want to put like this lead instrument in it, and you hear this melody and this sequence that goes over what you created, and it just would sound perfect sitting right there. To me, that would mean that would be what the actual vocal is. Like, you imagine somebody singing on it, or a certain like melodic sequence. That tells me that most likely that's what the artist is going to hear. What your job is to create a muse, like almost like an outline of what the artist is going to do or could do with the beat, and give them like a lead, give them like a segue into where to go, because you can hear it, you can hear what to add. That's your job. You're supposed to hear the melodies and the sequencing, but a lot of beat makers forget that there's another sequence that somebody else has to put in there, and you have to know when that particular part. Now, knowing exactly when it's right or not is different. A lot of the times you might want to send it to an artist or somebody else that's outside of you, that doesn't make beats, so they can tell you or not. Like I send it to artists, or I send it to rappers most of the time. But if you're making beats for, let's say, Spotify, and you just want people to listen to it, I believe it's whatever you want it to be, whatever experience that you want to create, because you have open control. You can add vocals yourself. You can do whatever you want. But usually, something is done when you are done listening to it. when you can't listen to it anymore, when you probably get sick of it, it's probably done. So, that's my perspective on how it goes. I hope that helps you guys. And I appreciate you, Curtis, for considering me on here. And y'all have a good day. Peace.
When it comes to creating, I usually start off with a pretty solid idea. After I'm finished doing my mental dump of contributing like melodies, counter melodies, all that stuff, transitions, what have you, I move on to the mixing phase. And the mixing phase is more of an editing phase. So when I'm listening to the mix in my car, if there isn't anything that I can add or remove, like turn down or turn up, that won't significantly impact the way that someone else might react to the song, that's the point that I know I'm done.
So for those artists that were saying the beats were too complete, obviously that got me overthinking things, maybe thinking that maybe my mix was too full, or it was too loud, or I was blaring through the master and I'm giving them beats with no headroom. And I was torn between, okay, well, I want to give them beats with with a little bit of headroom, but I also want them to be emotionally charged when they listen to the music. And when it's at -3 decibels or -6, I mean, a beat is a beat, but that bass got to kick through. And they be listening sometimes in headphones or in the car, and they want that to feel like the final draft. And so because of that struggle, this led me to changing my approach to, well, how do I know when I've added too much? In changing that, I felt like I changed myself. And I felt like, and as in that quote, where's that quote at? Let me pull that quote back up because it's very important. The quote said, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." And I always felt like there was another instrument that I could add. After I got some of those sort of complaints from my day one customers who were like, yeah, you going crazy and whatnot, and I love it, but it's just too much going on. I can't find my place in it. I found myself taking away things to complement what they were doing. But I felt like there was a limitation, an artistic limitation. And I felt like I was abandoning these works of art a little bit too soon. So this is what inevitably transitioned me into sort of the work that I'm doing now, with not just sound design, but also with getting my music on streaming. Because when you talk about creating an experience, an auditory experience for a music listener, their rules and parameters are much different than someone who's looking at it as, well, I have to add an instrument to that. And where do I fit in with that?
So Curtis asked me, how do I know when a beat is done? And, that's tough for me because I'm a perfectionist with my stuff. Like, I definitely want to make sure that before I put something out, I've gone in as much as I can and just captured every detail of, you know, whatever creativity I want to bring to that track. But from my experience, I know a beat is done when I sit down and I start making changes on that beat and listen to it later, maybe when I have some more objectivity. And I actually like the earlier mixes better. So a lot of times I'll go off in a certain tangent and try new things and try different stuff, but then I end up going back and rolling back those changes. So I know a beat is done when there's really nothing else I can add or take away from it to make it better. That's how I know.
When do I know when the beat that I'm working on is done? So I think one of the most effective ways that works for me is putting myself in the artist's shoes and asking myself if I'm able to write to the beat, sing to it, rap over it, whatever the case. I think once you do that, you know, you realize like, okay, if I'm capable of, you know, creating a melody or a cadence over the set beat, then the beat is done. If you're not able to come up with something really easily, that probably means that you have too much going on in the beat as far as your melodies and your counter melodies and things of that nature. If you feel like there's spaces that's missing, you can compensate with more writing or more instruments in your beat. But I think when you put yourself in the artist's shoes, it's very easy to come up with the answer. So there you have it.
Now, for that very reason that I just spoke about before, in that the artists were saying, oh, there's too many instruments in this. Oh my gosh, I don't know where to go with that. It did lead me to a lot of confusion where I was like, well, damn it. Well, how do I satisfy my creative goals? Because I'm still the producer of this. And how do I satisfy the customer? And how do I also, you know, I gotta pay bills. How do I find a marriage between the two? Inevitably, it led me to saying, and after many discussions with my brother Epic, it led me to having a conversation in my mind that was like, I don't think this is for me. I think that I want to be a full-blown instrumentalist. I want to be able to do too much so I know what too much is. And that is very much the DNA of my approach to making music today. Folks who come in the live stream who are not used to this approach, and I don't get offended by it, but I understand why they feel like, oh, it's a lot going on in your beats. You're putting so much in there. It's too much. It's too much. And then my question is, too much for whom? And if it's too much for you, well, I'm not making your beat. That should be obvious by now. Make my beat. And that was part of the reason why when I finally got back to making music after doing, going through so many different transitions as a businessman, as a man, as a creative, I had to find a happy place for me to just create and just to lay down as many instruments as I wanted to. If I want to put 15 damn contacts down, because my computer can handle it. If I could put down 15 contacts down and I just feel like it's necessary, well, damn it, I want to do that. And it's not a very foreign idea to music. It's just foreign a lot, I feel, on a more broad level in our genre of hip hop, right? Of trap. A lot of the music is very minimal in its approach. It's not a whole lot of instruments. But then I started thinking about my influences, and it's like, when you think about the production of like Earth, Wind, and Fire, one of my favorite bands of all time, funk bands of all time. You think about Parliament, or you think about George Clinton, and you think about what else? Cameo. Like, these are my influences, my big musical influences, even up to Outkast, even up to like Busta Rhymes, even up to, some EDM, some more recent EDM. A lot of this music is driven by music. And the vocals are sort of like a complement to what's going on. So now my approach, and I've been very, very consistent in this, is I would rather add too much so that I know what too much is and leave away from that production with the satisfaction that I've left it all on this proverbial court, on this musical journey that I am on. If an idea comes to me, it didn't come to me for no reason. Now, how that's arranged, we'll figure that out later on. But in the zone, if there is something that is driving at me that says this needs another layer, I don't question that anymore. I go with it, and then I allow the process to be the process. And then when it's time to sit back and look at it and say, where does everything fit? What I've noticed is that I now have more weapons to construct this beat with. Now I have an outro. Now I have a bridge part. Now I have an intro that feels unique. Now I have 4 bars or 8 bars within a verse that feel like, damn, like it really took me somewhere when you brought that bright pad in. But I think you don't find those moments unless you create those moments.
Yo, what's up? It's Eldre. How I know when my beats are finished, not to sound cliche or anything, but it's really just the vibe. Like, you can feel it. You just kind of know when it's done. But for the most part, if you find yourself adding stuff just to add stuff and those things don't work out, then you're probably just doing too much and the beat's just finished. So try not to be extra out with it. You don't need to add all these tiny things that people won't hear. Just once the bounce is right, the groove is right, and you're feeling it, then the beat's probably done.
What's going on? It's Larry O. The question is, when do I feel like a beat is finished? So when I feel like a beat is finished is when I can sit back, relax, bob my head, have a full-on experience from start to finish. I don't get bored at any times throughout the entire beat. Levels sound right, mix sounds right. I feel comfortable enough with it to release it to the world or to release it to artists. I think that it's very important not to dwell too much and not to nitpick too much on a mix. So just get it to a point where you feel comfortable with it and just throw it at the wall. Just throw it out there, let the world hear it. And I think that's when I usually feel like a song is done or a beat is done.
To piggyback off of the first quote that I shared with you from Albert Camus, I believe, that's how you say his last name, a true masterpiece does not tell everything. I think also we can get into a place where, I can get into a place where I want to say so much about this particular emotion that I'm trying to evoke in this particular beat that I oversay it. I overstate it, right? How do you overstate it? Well, I think the ways that I have overstated in the past will be like, this beat is wants to be disrespectful, right? This beat wants you to understand how pissed off I was that day. This beat wants you to understand how sad I am that day. This beat wants you to understand how passionate I am about what I do. But I think that there is a limit on a personal level to where you start realizing, maybe I didn't execute that, or maybe I overdid it just a bit to try to figure that out, right? So a true masterpiece does not tell everything. I agree with that too. I think that this quote can exist in the same vein as art is never finished and only abandoned, because I feel like there's also another voice that we don't really acknowledge as producers, and it's beyond an artist, but it's the mind of the listener, the thinker in the listener that's sitting down, and they may not be adding lyrics to your beat, but they're adding memories to your beat. They're associating memories. They're associating thoughts that are inspired by what you create. But I feel like in the same way that I, as an artist, used to feel like when I heard beats that had too much going on, it was really challenging for me to rap over them, not because I can't rap over them, but because I could not formulate my thoughts. I had to tell the engineer, yo, turn the music down a little bit so that I can formulate my thoughts. Well, if listeners are coming to your music to formulate their thoughts and what you have inspired by this palette of music, well, shouldn't we give them room as well? Just a thought.
I think one way I can determine if I know if a song is complete is asking myself, would I listen to the song every single day? And if the answer is no, then it's not a song that I like and it's not complete. So I have to make sure I have all the elements that a song needs, the sample or the melody, the chorus, drums, bass, sound effects, mixing it, making sure everything just sounds good. But just like that one thing, like what I listen to this every day. And one of the other things that I would recommend for producers is just the art of letting go. A lot of producers hold on to their beats because they don't think that it's finished, or for whatever reason. I would challenge you to do a 30-day beat challenge where you're finishing and completing a beat every single day. You're posting it on SoundCloud to hold yourself accountable. This allows you to build a habit of creating in a short period of time, as well as letting go and not being so attached to your music. That kind of helps you understand when you're done, because it honestly has to do with you and your mindset and just letting it go.
If I'm making the beat for myself, just to put out, just for streaming, for me, it's going to come down to the mix. Like, are there too many sounds clashing with each other? Like, is there enough space? Like even when like you pan it left and right, like, does it still sound like too much? When that happens, then I sort of like take steps back, like, okay, let's take out a few sounds. And then like once I have the feeling there, then it's like, okay, that sounds fine. When it comes to artists, I don't add as much. And so what I'll do is I'll be working on a beat, and it's like, okay, it feels like something is missing, but it's not an instrument. And so that's when I'll come to the conclusion, like, okay, it just needs a voice to fill in that empty space.
If I create from the heart, nearly everything works. If from the head, almost nothing. Mark Chagall. I cannot express or emphasize enough how important this quote is. How many times have you sat there and you allowed the influence of a tutorial, or you've allowed the influence of someone who told you, oh man, your mixing is trash, your 808s, you allowed that to seep into your decision making when you're just in the very raw stages of creation? How many times have you allowed yourself to detach yourself from your heart and in turn let your brain go into overdrive to make a beat, when the brain is not what creates the beat? Right? I think of the brain as an overseer. Right? The brain checks the time. The brain checks the CPU usage. The brain checks the latency. The brain checks all these things that are important. Yes, they're important. Don't get me wrong. But they're not as important, and they are not as essential to the idea of your music as the music itself and where that comes from, the heart. If the heart is inspiring all of these ideas and pulling from your experiences, or pulling from the mood that you're in, or pulling from the physical state that you're in, I feel like it's your responsibility to let that flow. But when you allow that thinking part, that prefrontal cortex, that other part of your brain that just, nope, it has to be this. I watched in a tutorial, all right? I watched 7 tutorials, and they all said I have to use this compressor on this. You're never supposed to use a reverb on an 808. Be that as it may, these are rules and fences that you're creating within your own mind, and that others have created within their own mind. How will you know that you have left it all on the court? How will you know that this is really a representation of what you are truly feeling inside of your heart, without trying? Without letting your heart fully speak through your music?
Yo, so the question is, how do you know when a beat you're making is done? It's solely off of feel. Most people are going to look for intricacies and trying to add layers, but once you feel it's done, that's done. You compare DJ Battlecat to DJ Premier. DJ Premier, drum, sample, it's basically a loop. It's done when it's done. DJ Battlecat, leads, bass, bridges, chorus, it's a complete song. 2 different types of styles, yet what's done is done. So however you feel, rather than the idea of things having to be super intricate to be finished. Oops.
A work is finished when an artist realizes his intentions. Rembrandt. Rembrandt implies that it's up to the artist to decide, not the critics, who may say a work appears raw, lacking a complete appearance. This is where you must take your audience's opinions, your peers' opinions, with the ultimate grain of salt. This is where you cannot let them dictate for you what your voice should be through the medium of music. At the end of the day, you were made uniquely to be who the fuck you are. I'm about to censor myself. Who the fuck you are. You know who you are? You that one sperm that made it. Your daddy balls say, you made it. You here. You here for a reason. You have all these unique experiences. Your life is literally made up of all these unique experiences that were given to you as a gift. The bad and the good were given to you so that you could tell a very unique story. Sounds sound the way they sound to you. You were given your ears for a reason. You were given your heart for a reason. You were given your fair share of heartbreak for a reason. You have been given trials and tribulations that some people have never endured or have been privileged to never even be near the proximity of. You must tell your story. And if a part of telling your overall story, not just the story of one beat, if part of telling your overall story is telling the minimal pieces of it, well, damn it, that's still your story. Have you ever talked to a friend that told you about a time that you helped them and you had no idea that they even needed help? A friend that might even have been suicidal. And they were like, remember that one day when I came and I talked to you and, I was acting kind of weird? Yeah. You was kind of off. Well, I was going through some things that I didn't really want to share and I really want to just keep it to myself. But because of what you said that day, that resonated with me and is really the reason why I'm here today. For anybody who's ever experienced that, and it gives you goosebumps to even think of that person not being as talkative or as expressive, being minimal in their expression of how they were in that point in time when they felt that way, that is still a part of their experience. So I think that we can relate this to incomplete beats because incomplete beats still tell a part of your story, right? It could have been the fact that, damn, I was going to make a beat, but my son ran into the studio that night. I was going to finish this beat, but my son ran into the studio that night and his diaper was falling off his ass and I had to stop and I had to go put it. It was a funny story, but that's what I'm saying. That's part of the story. So still tell that story. Also, the opinions of others, the critics, the folks who have made a career out of not creating anything except for an opinion off of what you're creating, you can't let them dictate what your voice should sound like. And I say voice, but we know that I'm talking about music. Let's talk about your artistic expression. You can't let them dictate that. The same way you wouldn't want somebody speaking for you and how you feel, when you really are passionate about that, why would you let someone's opinion speak for how you feel about your music? I know it's easier said than done. I know that it requires time and to build a thick skin. But these are the things that I had to tell myself, is that no matter where you get my art, mixed, unmixed, incomplete, complete, perfectly mixed, not perfectly mixed, you're getting me. God damn it, you getting me. And at that point in time, when I let those ears get to it, I felt that was right. It's funny how many skits I see from producers about, that beat that you work on at 3 a.m. and then 6 a.m. you wake up and you're like, ugh. And I get that because I've had that experience where some beats I thought was fire at 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. have new ears. I get that. But I also understand why we feel like that at 3 a.m. Why we feel so connected to this on an energetic level where we up here dancing at 3 in the morning. Now, some of that might be fatigue. Some of that might be delusion. Who cares? It's a part of your experience. So I'm not so quick to just trash that and throw it away. So in conclusion, how do we know when a beat is done? Curtis, how do you know when a beat is done? The beat will never be done. That is the big drum roll. The beat is never done. The beat is a checkpoint amongst many checkpoints that we will, God willing, come across and pass as we get to our ultimate conclusion, right? Which is death. As we are moving along this journey, I feel like every beat is a moment. Every beat is a picture in a photo album. If I harp on one photo in the photo album instead of continuously snapping photos, I'm not living life. I'm living in the past, right? There's a quote that gets often credited to Lao Tzu, but I guess it wasn't Lao Tzu, but it's still a fire quote no matter who came up with it. So let's just say anonymous. If you focus on the past, you feel depressed. If you focus on the future, you feel anxiety. If you focus on the present, well, you feel peace. And so I believe that it is our duty, it is our job as producers to let these moments in the moment be the moment. You may be a super technical producer that's like, this is against everything I believe in, and I don't want to change you because I think that even you being the way that you are, as technical as your work is, I wouldn't even say that yours is less artistic than somebody who doesn't put as much emphasis on it. I would say that that is your expression, that is your art form, that shows the story of how you do it. We are not what we do. How we do it is who we are. So that shows who you are. You're very thorough. You're very by the numbers. The numbers are your color palette. The numbers are your different paintbrushes. And that's fine. But embrace that. Embrace that and be that. But in the topic of when do I know when a beat is finished? Beat is never finished. But I do feel like there are conversations that I have in my head. And honestly, it's not really long conversations. It's almost like a nod, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? You walk past an old dude on the street and it's like, he ain't got to say how you doing, but you know what that means. You should just shaking, how you doing? I have those moments when I'm making beats. I'm making beats and I'm like, yeah, we're good. But I also think that's the reason why I speak out loud when I'm making my music too. Because I realize if I keep the conversation loud, it generally stays really positive, especially in my live streams. If I keep the conversation out loud, I also get to see how the tone of my voice starts to tailor and starts to go into another place. I start to see when fatigue is setting in. And instead of going like, oh, hell yeah, oh, shit, this is hard as hell. Instead of doing that, and I'm like, yeah, hey, okay. I know that I'm getting to a place where I am no longer making musical decisions. I am making pure time-based decisions. I am making very technical end decisions that I usually reserve for technical mixing days, like today is one of my mixing days. But the beat will never be done. It doesn't need to be done. I feel like once you are, as that one quote said, aware of your intentions with that particular beat, once you get to a place where you're like, that's it. That's what I wanted to express. You're done. And not done in the sake of that beat being audibly done or artistically done, but you are done at this checkpoint and ready to move to another one. Our most amazing moments don't find us when we're thinking about amazing moments. Our best beats don't find us when we're wishing at work for more time to work on fire beats. They don't find us even when we're in the studio sitting around thinking about what fire beat you should make. Your most special beat making moments, your most complete beats, your best beats, your finished beats, those beats that say, now that shit right there is representative of me and who and what I represent and who I am. Those happen when you sit your ass down into your chair and you cook. And you cook and you cook and you cook and you cook. And if you burn something, damn it, you throw the pan away or you clean the pan and you cook again. So my suggestion for those of you that are listening, that after now, you probably still got some questions, and that's fair. Please leave them in the comments below, and I would love to get the community to all attack those and answer those in a positive way. But after this episode, you know what you got to do. You just need more at-bats. Curtis, but what about my mixing? You will learn more from mixing than you will ever learn from watching everybody's tutorials, and they're teaching you all their good and bad habits. At the end of the day, if you don't like what you're making, if you're always looking for somebody else to make your art, you will never be satisfied anyways. You will never feel fully connected to this thing that can be a very spiritual experience. It's not like that for everybody either. I know for some people, this is just a paycheck. Just a paycheck. For some people, it's a paycheck and it's a spiritual experience. I think that can both exist. For some people, it's just a spiritual experience and they don't want to even have money touch it. I get that too. All of those folks can exist. We know that as human beings, we are multifaceted like that. But at the end of the day, the thing that you are lacking, if anything, is the ability to stay in the present moment, but also, in addition to that, to have more at-bats, to take more swings, to shoot more jumpers. Your musical style has no form because you're not shooting no jumpers. So get out there into that park called your studio when nobody else is looking, when nobody else cares is actually the best time because there's no expectations, right? If LeBron goes out into the park right now, your local park, and you can see him out your window and he's out there bricking free throws and bricking layups, and you record that, will that go viral? Yes, it will, because the microscope is always on him. If you go out there and start bricking, somebody might put it on a TikTok, but don't nobody care. Take advantage of this time. Take advantage of this time to use as many music producer-based brushes as you can on this canvas called your DAW. Just cook. And when you have more questions, just cook. And when you think you finally figured out the answer to your most complex question, cook some more. Thank you for watching today's episode of the Curtis King Podcast. This is definitely up there with one of my favorites. Shout out to every single music producer that agreed to be a part of this. You guys made this a very, very special episode. I am super excited about this new season of the Curtis King Podcast. I hope you guys are too as well. If you're listening on the major distributors, Spotify podcast or Apple podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star rating and some commentary. Let other folks who may be looking for something just like this, let them know that it's safe over here and everything is A1. But that has to go through your rating for them to see that. Also, for those of you on the YouTube, definitely leave a like. And if you're not subscribed, I mean, come on, man. You spend all this time with me. Come subscribe. Just stop playing. Stop playing. We family now. Come subscribe. But at the end of the day, my answer will remain the same. Keep creating. There is no too much. How do you know when it's finished? It's never finished. Well, how do you know when to stop? Which is probably a better question. It's up to you. But just realize this is one, God willing, of a million beats that you'll create throughout your career. Keep creating moments. In this life, you will not be full of life until you decide to live life to its fullest. Once again, it's Curtis King of the Curtis King Podcast. Have a good one.